Hello and welcome to Nighthawk Racing F1 RST Season 3, Round 3, here at the Temple of Speed in Autodrome National Monza, also just known as Monza. So we're going to head on to immediately just the event information here. So it's a 10 race championship, right? So that means we're on round 3, so we're towards the start of the season, so lots of drivers having ups and downs. We'll have to see over the course of the season. We'll see things steady out, but we still are towards the early end of the season. Of course, we do have two separate lobbies. We've got the red and blue lobby, so you'll be listening to the red lobby commentary for today. We have 30 drivers registered for the league, and as well, basically these 30 drivers would have been split up into red and blue lobby at the start of the season with lobby split qualifying, and then for the rest of the races it depends on your average points scored. So then aside from that, we've got a sprint race with 10 laps, we've got qualifying, and a feature race with 36 laps. And then as well, just in terms of the calendar, as I said, we're 3 races into the season, or this will be the 3rd race after the conclusion of this. On to you, Midnight.
Spot on, thank you very much. So we're going to head into the specifics for the format on this one. So first up, we will have the sprint race, which we set to 10 laps. All drivers will be given 85% fuel. So it's going to be a challenge to get round here, but it's going to be entertaining regardless, and that'll be a rolling start as well, which will then be swiftly followed up by the feature qualifying session, which all drivers setting their fastest times will have to start the feature race, which will follow the qualifying. We'll have to start said feature race on the same compound of tyres for the race, but which will bring us to our grand finale of the racing for today. Will be the feature race itself, which will be set at 36 laps with a grid start with random weather settings. But this being Monza, we are expecting a lot of clear sunshine today. So Mac, on to you for the points for this one.
So obviously the point system, there are different points for the red and blue lobby, but of course we are in the red lobby for today. But just in terms of the points, it's pretty much the sprint race is 10 laps as I mentioned, and the 36 lap feature race. So our first position, a sprint race win will get you 22 points, and then going down the order it decreases in multiples of 2 basically until you get to 8th position, where then it'll start decreasing in ones. So you've got 22 points for first, 20 points for second, 18 points for third, and then you see as you go down we'll have 9th is 8, 10th is 7th, 11th is 6. This is optimal point system, as obviously it means that everyone will score a point no matter where they finish, and fastest lap is 1 point in this sprint race. In terms of the feature race, we've got 45 points for first, and that's 5 more points than second gets, so getting a first position will definitely boost you up the order. And then in terms of that, you get a 5-point gap as well between second and third, so even just one difference in position does give you quite a nice reward, so drivers will be looking for the podium positions. And so 45 points for first, 40 for second, and 35 for third. And of course, fastest lap is 2 because it is a longer race, so there are more opportunities to get fastest lap. And all the way down from 1st to 16th, with 16th getting 3 points. And in terms of qualifying, we will have 3 points for first position, 2 points for second, and 1 for third. So getting them top 3 qualifying positions will definitely help you out. Even if it's just 3, 2, 1 points, it'll definitely boost you a small bit, and that just shows that qualifying even is important, even though the race is the most important part, which is where you actually get the most points, but it just gives drivers an incentive to get up there into the higher positions.
So Matt, that's great with all of the points. There's something to play for in every session there, and it's worth stating that for qualifying that you obviously have to carry the tyre choice across to the feature race. But for those that are focusing on the feature race, where the big points are, it does give a bit of reward for those going for pole position. So something to play for in every session today. But Matt, we're at Monza. I think we should do some track facts. How's that sound to you?
Absolutely. So, of course, in Gran Turismo 7, we actually do have 2 variations of the Monza track. We have one with the first turn and one without the first turn, which is, of course, that very treacherous Varianta chicane. So there's 11 corners around this track, and it is a total length of 5.793 kilometers. And as I'll always mention, 3.6 miles for the Americans out there. And this track, it's quite an interesting one. It's kind of, there's a lot of straight, lots of overtaking opportunities. There will definitely be a lot of slipstreaming. And in terms of tires and fuel, it will definitely be a fuel prominent race in the fact that fuel will run out first, or that's what we are predicting. As there's not much corners, there is a few high speed corners on the track, but mainly you'll be kind of guzzling fuel because of the fact that there's so much straight, so much long straights on the track. Of course, based in Italy, we all love Monza. I mean, it's such a nice track. Obviously, we all know turn one is a bit hectic sometimes, so it'll be interesting to see what drivers will do to mitigate having collisions into the first turn. And I mean, I'm just looking forward to it because there's so much overtaking opportunities, and it's one of those tracks where it's sometimes it's a bit more down to car, especially because the fact there's so much straights, and a car that's good in the straight line speed will of course excel. But at the same time, because there's a lot of nice flowing corners, it definitely evens out driver skill as well. So you might see a few drivers excelling at this track that we might normally not have the best of performances, but we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, quite right. It's a track that which really divides up cars, drivers, and particularly ones with high fuel consumption or indeed tyre wear. But we're going to, as you said, we're predicting low tyre wear, high fuel, but let's see what happens out on track. But I think we should go and look at the sprint race grid and chat about the drivers quickly. Okay, Mac, to the sprint grid. So, first up we have Sharon, who's becoming a regular face in here in the red lobby. Doing well, we'll be starting on P1 for that rolling start down into this corner here at Monza. Next up we have Yvonne, again becoming another regular face. That 911 is going to be an interesting car around here, but it's got good rear grip, so it should be good out of the chicanes. Up next, one of our commentators in Kirk. He had a very good round at Red Bull Ring, won quite comfortably in the blue lobby in the feature race, so we'll be looking to impress here. Next up, for the DSR team, we have Hartmann in that Corvette. The Monza does lend itself to a lot of straight line speed, and in that Corvette he will be looking to take advantage of it. Next up, Koulios, again a previous winner, particularly in blue and red lobby sprint races. So he will be looking for a good result here at the Temple of Speed. Next up, LB Lewis in that McLaren 650S. Some say it's a great car around here, others say it's a bit of a tricky car around here, but we'll see what he can make of it. And up last for me, before we go over to Mac, is Coach in that Jordan replica livery for the AMG. He is definitely going to want a good result here and maximise the V8 power from that AMG. So Mac, over to yourself for Sophie downwards.
Yeah, I mean, this grid is looking absolutely stacked for today. 13 total drivers for this sprint race. And the first one I'll mention is Sophie starting in P8. Of course, we saw her getting a brilliant feature race win in the blue lobby last week at Barcelona. So it's going to be interesting to see what she can do in the Ferrari 458. Of course, the Ferrari might have that home track advantage here in Italy. Next up is Dark Lord in P9. Of course, another person who was doing pretty well at Barcelona last week, went with a bit of an alternate strategy, trying to catch up to a few of the drivers up front and not working out, unfortunately. But starting P9, we'll have to see what the M6 can do. Kai in P10, of course, losing out a small bit at Barcelona last week, who was up at the front in P2 and P3 the whole race, and unfortunately switching onto that alternate hard tire strategy not working out for him. But starting P10 for the sprint race, that Corvette is going to be quick in a straight line here, but it's going to guzzle fuel, so we'll have to see what will happen. Midnight in P11 in the McLaren 650S, of course, beautiful livery as always, is starting in P11. A really, really good performance in the feature last week in P2. So going with a very, very alternate strategy, but unlike the other guys, it did work out this time. So we'll have to see what he can do in the sprint race from P11. And now up next is Pedro, who is, of course, second in the championship right now. So we will have to see what is Pedro going to be up to this race. Of course, in the AMG, maybe not the best of performances he would have wanted last week. Of course, was trying his best to get up into the podium positions, just getting a bit blocked up by some drivers. So, of course, P12, not the position you might want to be starting in the sprint, but with the straight, we'll see what if he can get some slipstream from drivers. And now, of course, at the back, it is Swizzy in the Mitsubishi Evo. Missed out on the last race, but it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. Can he maneuver around in the sprint race starting in the last mission? Can he jump Pedro into the first corner, or even Midnight that's up at the front? So it's all to play for here in the sprint race.
Perfect, Matt. Thank you very much for that rundown. So, into round 3, here we go. We're going to see a lot of those drivers that you just had a quick chat about, wanting to climb up the order. And now I do have the privilege of bringing in Sarah Hawkey, who will be here for the commentary for the racing. So, I'm going to hand you over, and I'm going to wish everyone in the red lobby a good race. Enjoy.
Thank you for passing the bat over to me, Midnight. Thank you for doing the intro. And we'll just talk about a little bit of a prediction before we get into the sprint race itself. So, Mac, any predictions before we go into the sprint race? Who are you betting on today?
Look, I'll be honest. I'm watching some of the Corvette drivers. Now, I might be biased as a Corvette lover, but I do believe the Corvette is a quick car around here. People like Hartman and Kai driving the Corvette on the grids, they'll be ones to watch, as that car, it does guzzle fuel very badly, but it is a very, very quick car in the straight line, especially around here with that main straight, with the turn 3, with the straight heading up to Ascari. I think it's going to be interesting to see how many positions they can gain here in the sprint race.
Yeah, it would be very interesting indeed. And yeah, as a Corvette lover myself as well, I think they're on for some good results. But I'm also looking at Swizzy, who's obviously starting all the way down in 13th. I'm wondering if he can make his way through the pack. How high on the grid can he get? Because you all know how fast Swizzy is. But yeah, I think a few people. Monza's one of those tracks that if you've driven it before, if you've got a lot of practice around, then it definitely helps going into the sprint race. And I think Monza's one of those tracks where I think a fair amount of drivers have quite a bit of experience on. So I think we're in for a good sprint and a good feature race tonight. But I don't know about you, Mac, but should we get into watching the sprint race?
Yes, absolutely.
Right, so as the drivers are getting ready for lap 1, we've got Sharon in P1, Yvonne in P2, heading towards that first chicane in turn 1, which we all know around Monza can be a little bit tricky to get right, but I'm sure the first lap they'll be eager to get it right. But we've got an all-lady front row for the sprint race, which I'm very happy about. But we've also got Kirk right behind these two ladies, and I'm sure he'll be eager to get in front of them as soon as he can, in front of those two 911s. Although Hartman makes quite a move on Kirk there, and Kirk loses P3 to Hartman, where Yvonne and Sharon seem to getting away nice and cleanly, building a little bit of a gap for themselves. But yeah, just behind them, all drivers getting through turn 1 and that first chicane, all nice and clean, and a few side by side, which is good to see. And like I say, I'm sure we're going to see that all race long and all evening long. As we go down to that second chicane, a lot of drivers going side by side, a little bit of a collision between LB and Coach, but I'm sure all of the drivers just eager to get as high up on the grid as possible. As I know, Swizzy starting all the way in P13, he'll be looking to get through the grid as soon as he can. But yeah, Sharon and Yvonne, the two 911s, still out in front, and Hartman closing in on them now. So it's going to be a bit of a battle for that first spot shortly. Anybody caught your eye, McManley?
Not really. I mean, it's been a pretty clean first lap so far. Not much overtakes or position changes, except for Hartman and Kirk swapping positions in the first turn. In fact, Kirk getting to the back of Hartman now. But as well, Lewis and Coach, I was kind of keeping an eye on Coach as he actually got past Lewis even before turn 1. So Coach managed to jump Lewis on the straight, as now Coach is going side by side with Dark Lord. And looks like Dark Lord might even be able to get past Lewis here as well. So there's a bit of contact, and now more contact as Dark Lord is spun round off of the final corner, off the Parabolica, and a bit more chaos now, as I believe Sophie, the one who might have had a bit of a collision with Dark Lord, slowing down to let him back past. But it looks like Kirk entering the pits with damage potentially off of the medium tires. Interesting to see. So maybe there was a bit of contact we hadn't seen with Kirk, but now heading into turn 1.
Unfortunately, Kirk did have a drive-through from last week, so I think he was just came in to serve that drive-through penalty, and they're getting it out of the way nice and early so they can get back in the fight. So yeah, I believe that's the reason for Kirk pitting. But you know, I'm sure he'll be back on the grid as soon as he can, getting in those fights again. But yeah, I think a bit of contact there, easily done on lap one of, especially around Monza. Everyone's eager to get going. But yeah, it looks like Louis indeed, drifting around that final few corners. Hopefully didn't pick up any damage. But Sophie and Midnight seem to be engaging in a bit of a battle here. Sophie on the inside line. McMahon, we've got a yellow flag. Oh, it's Sharon. Sharon has spun round. So our net leader has spun round and goes right down to 12th. So unfortunate for Sharon, losing quite a few positions there. But Pedro and LB Lewis and Coach look like they're about to have a bit of a battle. But we'll see who comes out. And Louis, aka the Dark Lord, also in this battle. So we've got a four-way battle for P5.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are really heating up now. And I do have to say, one of the people who gained a lot because of that contact heading to the Parabolica was definitely Kai, managing to gain pretty much about, I think, 4 or 5 positions as everyone was kind of packing up into that corner, trying to avoid each other. So now we see Suzy there in 9th position, trying to catch up to this 4-way battle as they head down the straight. It's Coach, Pedro, Lewis, and Dark Lord all following each other. Pedro to the inside, getting a bit of a bump draft from Lewis. Down the inside is a bit of contact now. Pedro's going to miss his turning point and head straight through them red barriers. So is going to get in a position, but potentially a penalty now, as I think maybe just slowing down there as Lewis gets past. That's unfortunate for Pedro. Just maybe a bit of contact on corner entry while trying to defend from the other drivers. As we see now, Dark Lord and Swizzy heading side by side into the second variante, and it looks like Swizzy not able to make that move.
Yeah, maybe Swizzy picking his time. As soon as he gets to that straight, I'm sure he'll be looking for a way round, as Pedro's also looking for a way round around LB Lewis. Oh, unfortunately LB Lewis does go a little bit wide there and gets caught out in a little bit of the gravel, but that does let Midnight and Sophie through. So yeah, a few positions lost to LB Racing, but I think the Dark Lord eager to get past Coach now, and as he knows, he's looking in his rearview mirror and he can see Swizzy right behind him, so a lot of pressure on Dark Lord here to get that move done on Coach.
Yeah, it looks like now Koulias is trying to find a way past Hartmann. Looks like the Corvette defending into the Curva Parabolica from the B or Z. We see now this will be a change of position for the podium, as Yvonne has been overtaken by Kai now there in the front. So Kai now leads in the Corvette. So it's a Corvette 1-3 at the moment, but they do have a pack approaching from behind who are eager for some positions, as Dark Lord now alongside Coach, going to be heading into turn 1. Dark Lord on the outside, which will be the inside for the second part of that corner. Midnight and Sophie still fighting in the back there, as it does look like Dark Lord has gotten past Coach. Midnight down the inside, managing to get P9. Good move there. Hopefully we'll be able to defend even more, as it looks like Sophie might have just not gotten the best exit, so that'll put Midnight at ease. But yeah, now Swizzy going around the outside of Coach into turn 3. Looks like Coach might be having a few issues. There's a bit of contact there heading into the corner now, but Coach is going to stay ahead. But a bit of contact heading out of turn 3, as we see up front now. It is Kai P1, Yvonne P2, and Hartmann P3. But as I said, Swizzy is very quickly trying to get his way up through the pack, and so is Dark Lord and some of the other drivers trying to get their podium positions.
Yeah, and Koulias on the back of the podium at the moment seems to be having a good showing so far. But as we can see, Swizzy eager to get to that podium positions, and I think he's fully capable of doing so. He's had performances like this before, although he does go a little bit wide into Ascari here, gets on a bit of the grass, faces the right way, doesn't drift or anything, but that pushes him out wide, which does lose him a little bit of momentum. But we all know that Swizzy, he's got 6 laps to go. I'm sure he'll be fighting for that lead shortly. But as we see LB Lewis working his way through and past Sophie and eyeing up a move on his fellow McLaren driver, Midnight ISO. Will he get it done into turn 1? we'll see. But going back up to the lead, we've got a battle with Hartmann and Koulios. Koulios has gotten past Hartmann, but Hartmann is right on his tail. He's looking to go into that inside line, but thinks better of it into turn 1. Let's Koulios get round, and I'm sure he'll be eyeing up the move shortly.
Wizzy now past Coach, heading a bit wide into the second part of the corner, but manages to just drive away on corner exit. But Coach is very much on the back of him, but does have pressure from Pedro behind. So that's going to be interesting to see whether Pedro can get past. Of course, both the same manufacturer car, so will be solely down to the drivers to make a move here. As it looks like Coach on late on the brakes as Pedro tries to go down the inside, but there's unfortunately just not enough room there and has to back out of it. So Pedro will have a lot more opportunities. We are, of course, nearly halfway through the race now, lap 5 out of 10. As now the pack is settling down a small bit, as we also see Dark Lord with a penalty, but on the back of Koulios. So he will have to serve that, but he's definitely catching up to that. Because there's someone off in the background. His Coach has had a spin in the background. That's engine damage and front end damage. What has happened there?
Yeah, a bit of collision or potentially a mistake that we didn't pick up on there. But yeah, engine damage that's going to cost him a lot when he comes into the pit. But yeah, I mean, Coach's livery is very distinct that you can see that yellow Mercedes from miles away. But unfortunately, it does get into the gravel, and we'll have to pit for that damage. But I think, well, you know yourself, the sprint race is usually where drivers, you know, if they haven't had the chance to practice, the sprint race is their first opportunity to kind of, although it's at racing speed, it's to practice your braking points, your lines, stuff, to going into the quali and the feature race. So potentially, you know, a few drivers, you know, testing the limits of the track, shall we say, see what works, see what doesn't, and then they can use that in the following sessions this evening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely good practice for the feature, and they even have qualifying as well for the feature race to try out the softs and see how the car feels with a lighter fuel load and also with the quickest tires. But just going back to that Coach incident that happened earlier, quite interesting how he ended up with engine damage and then reversed in the gravel. I think potentially maybe off the first Lesmo getting into the gravel, maybe just spinning into the inside barrier, because considering how close he was to the track, it would be quite interesting if he was to bounce off one of the outside barriers, would be unlikely. So maybe just an issue off the exit of the first Lesmo. But as we see now, unfortunately, heading through turn 1, going off in turn 1, just that car definitely not 100%. As we see now, Hartmann in P2 and Kai in P1. So Corvette 1-2, but there is this pack catching up to them of Dark Lord, Swizzy, Koulios, Pedro, all trying to get up into the podium positions. There's about 4 laps left to go. This is going to get interesting. And in fact, Hartmann has a bit of an issue there, getting a bit of a wobble in Ascari. Lets Avon pass. But now Avon is going to have to serve a penalty. Has spun round off of Ascari. Is Hartmann. Manages to do a 360 and get it back on the track. So not that bad, but he's not going to be happy about that. Maybe just off the exit of the corner because he was going slowly. Maybe a bit of a speed mismatch causing a spin there, causing someone to hit him. As we see now, even more issues as Sophie goes a bit too wide onto the grass and doing a bit of a Tokyo drift. A really good save, but just touching the grass with the left-hand side tires, causing her to swerve on the track.
Yeah, what a save there. I mean, it did look very cool on replay, I'll say that. But we've got the Dark Lord in the inside line of turn 1 on Yvonne. Manages to get past. But Swizzy up to P2. When did that happen? Amongst all of this chaos, Swizzy has found a way through onto that podium spot, and I'm sure he'll be chasing down Katie Dekai shortly. But the two McLarens also have Midnight and LB Lewis fighting it out. But yeah, unfortunately, I think what happened with Hartmann there is lucky not to pick up any damage. You know, when you spin in front of traffic, it's always worst case scenario that you think someone's going to come up and hit you. But yeah, luckily avoids any damage, which shouldn't affect his race too much. But obviously losing quite a few positions means that for these last few laps he'll be definitely on it and trying to gain as many positions as he can.
Do you think Swizzy could have capitalised off Hartmann spinning, because the pack would have had to check up especially when Hartmann was rejoining the racing line after having a bit of a wobble into Ascari. So I'd say maybe capitalizing on that, just the pack slowing down, he might have had a gap between himself and the guys ahead, so that would have given him a bit of a speed differential to manage an overtake either before the Parabolica or just give him a better run into the Parabolica and exit onto the main straight. As we see Midnight here trying to launch an attack on Lewis, but it's not going to be good because he's going to go onto the gravel with Sophie catching up to him, but Sophie's going to have that 0.5 second penalty to serve, so she's going to serve that now, and Midnight will be relieved a small bit to not have the Ferrari as close in his mirrors. But that mistake does leave Yvonne get away, or Lewis get away, sorry, as we see a bit of an issue there, maybe a bit of a slide out of the Parabolica for some of the drivers, Pedro and Yvonne, potentially, as Pedro is now catching Koulias in the BRZ.
Yeah, that BRZ seems to be one of those cars that it suits certain tracks, but maybe Monza's not one of its, its favourite tracks, shall we say. I think maybe potentially lacking on that top end speed. It doesn't seem that Koulias is making too many mistakes. So unfortunately, some of the other cars around him have just got that higher top end speed, which around Monza with these long straights and the chicanes, it really does help. But I think Koulias doing really well so far, and he's still in contention for some really good points here. And although I'm sure he'll be looking in his rearview mirror to see that bright blue Mercedes of Pedro right behind him, and Pedro also looking to capitalise on quite a few points, shall we say. But that looking through the grid, we also have the two McLarens of Midnight and LB Lewis back together, and with Sophie not too far behind. Obviously, like McManley said, last lap had to spend that half a second penalty, but it's good to see these three battling it out. And I think if anything, if the sprints provides us with so much action already, we're in for quite a treat for the feature race.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the pack is able to stay together relatively well, so there's definitely battles all throughout the field. As we see now, Pedro trying to go around the outside of the Parabolica, not going to work, but he will get the switchback and the exit for this main straight. And it looks like now Pedro is alongside and nearly going to be past, I'd say. Might be able to clear him before turn one, and he will indeed. So Koulias is now going to maybe bump draft him, but no, he's not, pulling to the outside and back into the slipstream of Pedro. But Pedro is, of course, going to be under pressure now into turn one. Is Koulias going to send it into turn one potentially? Yes, it does look like he will, down the inside, and he does end up getting that position back, but for how long is the question.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree, Mac, but it looked like Pedro knew that move was coming. It looked like Pedro slowed all the way down and left enough room for Koulias to get into that inside line. So good, awareness by Pedro, knowing that Koulias was more than likely to send it down to turn one.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe just planning a small bit. Maybe going to try overtake him again, have another chance. Maybe just there is 2 more laps left in the race. He will have another go at that, as we see now Kai at the front leading from Swizzy, and that Corvette is pulling away at the front. We'll have to see if he can keep that lead for this final lap. This is the penultimate lap right now, but when they cross the line for the final lap, Pedro still behind Koulias with Yvonne behind him as well. So Yvonne has caught up to Pedro there, but does have a 0.5 second penalty, so unfortunately will drop back once again. And this pack will be interesting to watch, definitely, between Koulias and Pedro. The pair will definitely swap positions. Oh, a slide from Koulias in the BRZ out of Ascari. He's definitely feeling that pressure from the Portuguese drivers. Pedro pulls to the outside like he did last lap, but will he be able to get a better run onto the main straight? They're braking now, and Pedro pulling out from the outside lines. You see again, Pedro goes to that inside, but he's not able to get the run like he did last time, so he's still behind Koulias. But this sets him up well for a launch into turn one.
Yeah, it looks like that side by side, those two there. I'm just wondering if who's going to come out on top. But like you say, Yvonne, she's got front row seats to this battle at the moment. So any mistake from either driver, I think Yvonne could definitely capitalise here. As it looks like Koulias is just... Oh, he spun round. Koulias has spun round out of that first chicane, which does send him on the grass and does let Pedro through. So maybe a potential little bit of mistake there, and maybe put on the acceleration just a little bit too early, and it does spin him round, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. I can tell you from experience that having a car that close to you for the entire straight and even into the corners, it puts a lot of pressure on you, worried about whether they're going to launch move down the inside or even just kind of bump you into the braking zone. So maybe Julia's just feeling that pressure from Pedro and just making that slight mistake. Very unfortunate. Drops into P9 behind Midnight in the McLaren. But now we're on the final lap. And it does look like Kai may be coming home with the win as long as he does not make any mistakes. Yvonne, actually, after serving that 0.5-second penalty, looks rapid in that Porsche. And Yvonne getting a bit low on fuel, but will have enough fuel to finish this lap. And in fact, Yvonne currently on a personal best this lap. Around the outside to Scary. Now the inside from the next corner. A brilliant move from the Dutch driver and making it up to P4 there. So that's going to be a good finish for her. But up at the front, of course, it is the Corvette, the C7 of Kai, coming around that final corner, the Curva Parabolica, to come and take the checkered flag in P1. A brilliant performance with Swizzy close behind in P2 and Dark Lord in P3.
Yeah, and then next up we have Yvonne crossing the line in P4. What a finish for her. Pedro in P5 just behind. A nice little last lap battle between those two. We then have... What happened there? We then have LB Lewis coming home in P6 and Hartman P7. We then have Midnight in that McLaren P8. And then if you want to run down the rest of the grid.
Yeah, definitely. We have Midnight in P8 in the McLaren. Then we have Sophie in P9, Koulias P10, Kirk 11th, Sharon 12th, and Coach 13th. So a few tough races for some of the drivers and some excellent performances from others. So we'll have to see how this rounds us up for the feature race.
Yeah, a very exciting sprint race, as you say, and a few, good results, and obviously, like I say, a few mistakes, which did drop a few drivers a little bit lower than probably what they wanted. But like I say, the sprint race is their first kind of opportunity of the night. We've still got the qualifying and the feature race. So if you're ready to do so, let's go see where all the drivers qualified.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it looks like we had quite an exciting qualifying session there. We've got Swizzy in P1 with a 146.617, and just behind him we've got Katie the Kai. These two separated by only a tenth, so it's going to be close between Katie the Kai and Swizzy tonight. In P3 we then have the Dark Lord, aka Louis. In P4 we have Coach, and P5 we have Sophie, and separated by only 7 thousandths is Sophie to Midnight. Midnight set in quite a good time, and like I say, those two extremely close to each other, barely nothing separating the two. In P7 we then have Sophia in the Corvette, joined us for the quali and for the feature race hopefully. But in P8 we then have Yvonne in that 911. In P9 we have LB Lewis. In P10 we then have Pedro. 11th we have Kirk. P12 we have Hartman in that Corvette. P13 Koulias. And rounding off the grid tonight we then have Sharon in the Porsche 911 in 14th place. It looks like quite a close qualifying session between the drivers, only separated by a few tenths each of the drivers, so it's going to be quite a good feature race, I assume. But let's get straight into it and see where everyone ends up in the feature race.
And we're lined up now on the grid. We have 5 red lights. Swizzy on pole, Kai lined up alongside him. Let's see who's going to get the jump into turn 1. It's lights out and away we go. Looks like Swizzy got a good start, and it looks like Dark Lord hasn't got the best of starts. It's Sophie now lined up alongside him in that Ferrari. Heading into turn 1 now, it's Sophie in P3, but Dark Lord behind us. Dark Lord tries to send it down the inside, and Sophie around the outside. There's chaos into turn 1 as there's everyone side by side. Cars everywhere. Luckily not off the track though, as we see now up at the front it is Swizzy, who's got a nice gap already to Kai, and Kai as well having a nice gap to Dark Lord, who's going to be under pressure from Sophia and Sophie into the next corner. Looks like Sophie having to give up position to Sophia in the Corvette. Sophia looking down the inside, not able to get a move done. Looks like now the pack scrambling everywhere. It looks like Pedro off into the gravel there now, off of Variante Alta, unfortunately. As we see now Sharon as well having a few issues in the Porsche in P14 as well. So that's a very unfortunate, maybe the two incidents connected. Not sure about that one. We'll have to see post-race. But it looks like now Dark Lord managing to pull away from Sophia a small bit. His coach is now putting a bit of pressure on the 458 driver of Sophie. They're heading down this straight now, soon into Ascari. As it looks like there won't be any change of position. Single file through here, and no overtakes look like they're being made. As the pack has kind of fanned out a small bit. A lot quicker than it was in the sprint. It took a while in the sprint for the pack to kind of settle. Of course, there are people getting up from positions as there are quick drivers starting towards the back. But it looks like the pack has definitely spread out quicker than it did in the sprint. We see Hartman gaining a position there on the BRZ driver of Koulios. Heading on to the main straight now to start the second lap of the race. Pretty interesting first lap, Sarah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We've got quite a few battles kind of engaging already. So, you know, lap one, it's always the toughest lap around any track. You know, getting that lap one under your belt done and dusted. I'm sure the drivers will be, you know, calming down now. A few incidents, like you say, a few battles. But yeah, a really interesting lap one.
Yeah, definitely. Very clean into turn one as well. I have to give credit to the drivers. We see a lot of the time there will be chaos into turn one, but all the drivers keeping it relatively clean, so fair play on that note. But it looks like Sophia and Sophie battling side by side now, as Sophia has to take to the curb, and because of that, bouncing off the curb and hitting Sophie off of the track. That's very unfortunate. Sophie's going to drop now to P9, I believe, and very unfortunate for the 458 driver, but Sophia gets away unscathed, only to lose a bit of time to coach. So a bit unfortunate, Sophia having to take to the curb, but I'm not sure what the verdict on that incident will be from the stewards. But coach now is just trying to catch up the AMG driver, looking at the gearbox of Sophia. We'll have to see what can come of that. Up front, it is Swizzy leading the way with quite a nice gap to Kai. Kai probably not having as much slipstream as he would like, would want to get closer to the back of the Finnish driver. But Dark Lord now there in P3 as well in the M3, managing to gain a nice distance between himself and Sophia. But yeah, I mean, that was an interesting collision into that corner, as we see now Sophie and Yvonne battling.
Yeah, no, I was just keeping an eye on Coach and Thea. Looks like Midnight is getting very close to these two, shall we say, and we'll be kind of seeing where these two are battling, where he can potentially make his move. But yeah, I saw a little bit of an incident between Yvonne and LB Lewis, I think, last lap, which did mean LB Lewis did have to escape into the gravel, which did lose him quite a few positions. But I'm sure he'll be ready and eager to get back into that battle. But yeah, just having a quick look throughout the grid, it looks like Kirk has made a good start as well. He's on the back of the two screen-to-speed ladies of Yvonne and Sophie. And I'm sure, you know, after what maybe potentially was a little bit of a disappointing result for Kirk in the sprint race with that drive-through penalty, I'm sure he'll be looking to rectify that in the feature race here.
Yeah, it does look like Lewis has gotten some rear end damage off of that incident with Yvonne potentially. So unfortunate for him, as he now gets picks up a 1 second penalty potentially for putting the second chicane. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't catch that incident with Lewis, of course. I know that you did, Sarah, but yeah, unfortunate for the McLaren driver. That rear end damage will hurt his speed around the course. As we see now, the drivers flying past, heading into Ascari. Kirk catching up to the Porsche driver of Yvonne. We'll have to see what he can do, if he can get a bit of slipstream on the main straight, maybe make a move into turn one. We'll see now, oh, that's not going to help. Kirk with a 5-10 penalty, not going to help his efforts trying to catch up to Yvonne. But it looks like Sophie definitely got past Yvonne pretty quickly and has gained a nice bit of track distance between the two ladies. We see now Sophia might have dropped a few positions, has she, into P6. Was ahead of Coach at Midnight, but now down in P6. I wonder what happened there.
Yeah, potentially again maybe a mistake or a little bit of an incident that we may have missed there. But yeah, it does lose quite a few positions to Coach and Midnight. Although Coach and Midnight, I think will be very happy about that they managed to capitalise on that position, as those two are still engaging in a little bit of a battle here. But yeah, well, we know how quick Sophia is in that vet, so I'm sure it won't take her too long to get back on the back of these two in front. But yeah, obviously not too far behind. We've got Sophie as well in that 458, and it seems to be that 458 is quite a difficult card to handle at times, but Sophie seems to be handling it pretty well.
Yeah, actually, just forgot to point out as well, actually, Yvonne does have front-end damage, so it looks like maybe Yvonne's speed getting a bit hurt by that damage, so that is, of course, going to let Kirk get past a lot easier, and maybe even Hartman and Pedro behind. The damage definitely will hurt you around the track. It decreases your downforce, but it also just hurts the straight line speed at the same time, so it's just a double whammy in terms of car performance. Kirk's going to serve this penalty now, but I'm not sure if Yvonne will be able to get past into the Parabolica, but it definitely will give her a chance to get a bit of slipstream and maybe just increase the top speeds. Oh, and a bit of a near miss there between the two drivers as Kirk got to slow down for that penalty, but Yvonne definitely getting past the BMW driver, but we'll have to see if Kirk can gain that position again quickly. And up at the front still is the same top three of Suzy, Kai, and Dark Lord. Not much change. And the Coach and Midnight battle hasn't seen any difference either. As you see there, Coach still in P4 with Midnight chasing him down behind. Let's see, Midnight they're both on the same tire. They're both on the soft tires, so the same tire compound, so there's no tire difference here. Just may be a case of Midnight biding his time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to come, but he is going to have to get a move on because Sophia on the medium tires behind is definitely keeping pace with them. So that might be a bit of a warning for Sophia's pace later in the race, considering keeping up with the two drivers on a different compound of tire.
Yeah, and obviously, like you say, another thing to mention, obviously, some of the drivers in that top kind of 7 battle, some of them being on the faster tyre of the softs to start off with, as opposed to Sophia, who's on the medium. So obviously, slightly different strategy between some of the drivers here. But I know for a fact that Midnight usually has some unique strategy, shall we say. So I'm sure that will come into play later on in the race. But yeah, looks like he's kind of abiding his time at the moment, and hopefully, making his strategy work out. But does lose a position there to Sophie, and Sophia manages to get back through as well. So Sophie and Sophia, try not to accidentally say the wrong one, but yeah, it looks like Midnight loses a few positions there, but on the soft tyres, I'm sure I'll be able to make it up. But yeah, quite a few drivers opt in for the mediums to start off with, which obviously may put them on the back foot a little bit with the soft runners around them. But yeah, unique strategy for Midnight, I'm sure we'll see, but a lot of different tyres across the grid.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I saw what happened to Midnight there, basically just getting a bad exit off of the Variant Alta, which let Sophia get past and let Sophie catch up to the back of him, heading into the two Lesmos. We see there's a bit of a battle here towards the back, with Hartman going wide in the Parabolica and now managing to get up into P8 to get ahead of the pack. Pedro is trying to find his way through as well. In P10, maybe not the position Pedro wants to be in right now, but he's on the mediums. So we will have pace later in the race once switching onto the faster compounded tire, hopefully. But yeah, it looks like the Porsche, the Corvette, and the Mercedes currently trying to fight for that P8 position. But yeah, as you said, it looks like Coach at the front as well has actually ended up getting a 0.5 second penalty. So maybe Sophia might have an easier time of getting past. You can see there, yeah, the yellow and green Mercedes it's actually turned into a 1 second now, so maybe exceeding the track limit once again. So that is going to help Sophia catch up and potentially pass the Mercedes driver. So an unfortunate bout with the track limits there, as we see Pedro defending from Kirk, managing to keep him behind. But yeah, Pedro's just trying to crawl his way back up the pack after that first lap incident into the Variante Alta, which potentially might have involved Sharon as well. But yeah, it looks like Pedro just trying to get a bit of speed here, but it just looks like constantly under attack from the rear and then trying to attack at the front. It's quite difficult. around this track.
Yeah, and LB Lewis looks to also kind of make his McLaren known. You know, he's going on the inside of Kirk there. Doesn't manage to get the move done, but he's definitely eyeing up a few moves here. As we see Kirk braking quite late. LB Lewis looking to get onto the inside of Kirk, but Kirk manages to stay in front just for now. But quite a nice little group that we have here running. Obviously, Kirk, I'm sure, is eager to get past these drivers, but he's biding his time. We also have the likes of Yvonne and Pedro towards the front of this group, doing remarkably well so far, and Hartman managing to hold these drivers back. Yeah, going back to the front, Swizzy, Katie, the and Dark Lord, they seem to be in a little bit of a race of their own. They've got out in front. They haven't needed to kind of stress too much. Although we see Katie the and Swizzy not separated by much now. So potentially on for a battle for the lead shortly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it did look like there as well, just a few position swaps. We saw Coach lose 2 positions because of that penalty. So not only Sophie also getting past. So the 2 similar names of Sophia and Sophie both managed to overtake the Mercedes driver. But yeah, back to what you said about Kai and Swizzy. It does look like Kai has definitely caught up a bit more to Swizzy to the back of the Evo driver, but it's just a case of whether that's down to maybe a mistake from Swizzy or maybe the Corvette just with this superior straight line speed just not managing to gain the corners. Maybe that might be a factor as well. But yeah, here again, Pedro still having a fight with Kirk, just not able to catch up to the Porsche Vaughn and just getting kind of roped into this battle that Kirk and Lewis are putting on. But I will say Lewis is definitely gaining because of having the slipstream from Kirk, because that rear end damage is not nice on these cars. It looks like Pedro has maybe pushed Kirk onto the grass there, and Kirk having to take avoiding action, heading across the grass into the Barbolica and onto the tarmac. That was an interesting one, as it looks like now that Pedro has just disappeared, and it looks like maybe a technical issue on Pedro's side.
Yeah, potentially. We've all experienced it before, disconnect, and unfortunately, it does look like Pedro has disconnected there. But unfortunately, Kirk get involved in that kind of potentially Pedro not being able to exactly know 100% where Kirk is due to the technical issues. So yeah, unfortunate for Kirk. I'm sure he didn't want to get any damage this early on in the race, but hopefully we've still got quite a few more laps to go, so he'll be able to get back into the fight. But it's promising from Kirk. He's on the back of Pedro and looking to kind of pave his way through the grid. So I'm sure he'll be eager to do that again. But yeah, unfortunate for Pedro. We all know how fast Pedro is in that Mercedes. So yeah, unfortunately a few technical issues, but we've all experienced them. But back to the other drivers, we have Sophie and Sophia battling out, with Sophia with a half-second penalty, so that may see her lose a position to Sophie here.
Yeah, Sophie just running wide onto the AstroTurf there in a scary, but that doesn't matter because Sophia has to serve that penalty. It does look like the penalties are very, very detrimental in this race. They say half a second, but it does look like they're losing a second even when they're serving them penalties, maybe even a second and a half. But it does look like the penalties are a lot more harsh than they're actually labeled. As we see Sophia now getting again to the back of Sophie, using the power in that Corvette, heading down the straight now side by side. The 2 drivers battling side by side in turn one. It does look like Sophia's gonna edge out Sophie into the first corner there. The superior straight line speed of that Corvette winning out against the 458 driver, and now that leaves Coach managing to catch up a small bit to this battle. Of course, the more that the pair battle, that means Coach and Midnight Behind have a chance to catch up and potentially join the pair. But it looks like up in front again, Kai does look like he is inching closer sometimes to Swizzy and then kind of dropping back. So maybe just the pair managing the tires, managing the fuel, maybe just kind of trading lap times. That might be why we're seeing them kind of the gap kind of extending and closing again. But Dark Lord definitely close to Kai as well. So I think right now is a game of tire management and also fuel management, because of course they want to make as minimum stop as possible.
Oh yeah, 100%. We all know how much time you lose during a pit stop, so drivers won't want to waste too much time in the pits, although unfortunately it's always the case. The fuel will reduce way faster than what the tyres will. So unfortunately the drivers will have to come in and pit at some point, but for now the less pit stops that they can do the better, because especially for the drivers that are engaging in a little bit of a battle this early on into the race, they'll be eager to kind of get past the fellow drivers and then think about the strategy. But yeah, obviously if you've picked up damage, that means that you've had to pit potentially a little bit earlier than you expected. But I'm sure I think the time for our first few pit stops will be coming shortly, as most drivers, getting towards that quarter tank of fuel. But again, on to lap number 10, we still have quite a few drivers quite close to each other. That first, second, and third, they're getting close to each other, but they're in the race of their own at the moment. And we've got a nice little pack in the middle. Although it does look like Sophie does get a little bit. 2 wheels on the gravel, which does lose her a little bit of traction in that coming out of that first chicane, but she's still on the back of Sophia, and going in towards that second chicane side by side, all onto the grass. A little bit of a wiggle there, so she stays behind Sophia for now. But yeah, potentially eyeing up a move, but unfortunately, a little bit of grass, a little bit of gravel does lose her that traction, and potentially does mean that she couldn't cement that move there and then.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to a point that me and Midnight made in the Blue Lobby commentary from Barcelona. Of course, Sophie was in Blue Lobby for Barcelona last week and now is up in Red Lobby for Monza. But it does look like the 458, she is one of the few 458 drivers in the league, and it does look like that car wears down the rear tyres a lot quicker than its competitors. So maybe struggling with a bit of traction while trying to get out of the corners. And it'll be interesting to see what she can do to manage it throughout the race. Of course, some conventional means of managing tyre wear would be moving the brake bias towards the front to take the load off of the rear tyres under braking, but that could affect the handling of the car, especially around a track with so little corners and very heavy braking zones. You might not want to do that, as we see Sophie is still on the back of Sophia, trying to make a move. They've been trading positions the whole race. We'll have to see, can she cement it this time?
They're going side by side now into that, down the start finish straight, and into that first, the first chicane, which is very difficult to do side by side, may I add. So it looks like Sophia just break that a little bit later and cements that inside line, but does look a bit sideways coming out of the chicane though, which means that Sophie is on the outside. Although these two cars quite matched on speed, so I think it's going to be kind of who can brake later going into this second chicane here.
Yeah, it's quite hard as well. It's probably harder to go side by side into the second chicane, as it's quite a sharp left and right. As you see Sophie maybe flashing the headlights there a small bit, maybe not happy with the defense that Sophia is putting up, but we see now what this is doing is it's reeling Coach and Midnight straight into this battle. So if they keep fighting each other for the next few laps, it is going to lead to even maybe losing or gaining even more positions for the drivers. But yeah, I mean, we have to see, can Sophie manage to catch up? We see Swizzy up at the front. It does look like that gap has grown between himself and Kai. You can see there now Kai only exiting Ascari as we're looking. Swizzy comes down half of the straight heading into the Parabolica. But yeah, it looks like that gap is opened. So maybe Kai in tyre management phase, or even just fuel management phase. But yeah, that Corvette, as I said, it is very bad on fuel. It might be good on the straights, but it is not good with the fuel performance.
No, definitely not. And just further back, we've got Sophia making that move. Sophie making the move on Sophia, and Coach capitalises and gets past Sophie. Does it quite a mistake between Sophie and Sophia there, does let Coach through. But the two girls looking to get past Coach again. Coach in the middle of this sandwich here. Sophia taking a little bit of grass there to make sure that she doesn't come in contact with Coach, and that was very close. That could have been, a potential race-ending move going on the grass there. But again, it's Sophia out in front, Sophie just behind, and Coach, after getting past these two, back into P6.
Yeah, pretty much just reset their positions after the parabolica. Everyone back in the positions they were on the previous lap. But it looks like Coach was able to capitalize off of Sophie spinning up the rear tires, possibly because of that rear left tire wear, and managed to just capitalize off of that. As we see Yvonne, the first pit stopper in the race, coming in, repairing that front end damage and putting on a fresh set of tires, getting a lot of fuel in the car. We'll have to see. This will be good data for some of the drivers that are yet to pit to see what the new tire advantage will give them. But yeah, it looks like Dark Lord is definitely closing the gap between himself and Kai, but I don't know if there's going to be a move anytime soon because, of course, they're all kind of trying to manage their tires, as I mentioned previously many times before. But yeah, Swizzy still up at the front, and it does look like that rear tire. Maybe the Evo is another candidate for that rear tire wearing quicker than the fronts. It could be down to brake bias, as I mentioned, but it does look like it is taking a bit more of a beating. You see, Dark Lord is now going to be another man to enter the pits, and off the soft tires, 9% fuel left.
Yeah, like you said, Mac, Dark Lord in with 9%, cutting it fine, shall we say. But yeah, it seems that the first lot of pit stops are upon us. 13 laps into the race, quite early, but especially those that started on the softs, it doesn't last long. As we see Sophie coming in as well. I was on board with Sophie a few laps ago. It looks like she had a bit of a spin, which dropped her back from fighting with Sophia. But again, we've got the group of Midnight, Coach, and I believe that's Sophia in that Corvette. But these three have got close to each other again. But yeah, we've got quite a big battle approaching us. And has anything caught your eye, Mac?
Not really, just going to be interested to see what tires these pit stoppers are going to go on to and how long they're going to extend this next stint, really. Obviously, this battle, of course, is still brewing. I mean, its Coach has been battling the entire race, and so is Sophia, and now Midnight is ahead of them in P3 right now, so in the podium positions. Of course, that is not actually P3 because they will be pitting soon, and of course, there are other pit stoppers who've already made their stops. So it's interesting though, Midnight in P3, ending off from Coach and Sophia as they head onto the straight before Scary, and Sophia heading for a move down the inside now on Coach, and she's going to get it done, but she goes wide, breaks too late, and that leaves Coach straight back through. But it does look like these three will be on low fuel, so they're going to be heading into the pits as Swizzy pulls into the pit lane now. So will Kai as well. So a lot of all of our kind of top five are going to be heading to the pits this lap. I'd say you can see Kai 7% fuel, Swizzy 10%. Is Sophia hitting the grass there and nearly running off the track and definitely breaking a bit deep into the corner. Except Midnight is going to stay out, and Coach and Sophia are going to follow Kai and Swizzy into the pits.
Yeah, it seems that Midnight's going for a few laps longer. I believe he's coming at the end of this lap as that fuel indicator is flashing. But yeah, it lets Midnight have a little bit of a break from the two drivers around him. He can breathe a little bit, but I'm sure he'll be pushing just as hard to make that gap a little bit bigger, so that when they come back, well, when he pits, he has that kind of buffer so that he's not brought back into the battle. But yeah, I mean, mostly everyone's coming for their first pit stop. A few staying on the same set of tyres, so we're going to change that second compound later into the race. As we see the Dark Lord and KD the Kai coming out of the pits. Dark Lord going side by side into the turn one. And Dark Lord manages to get that move done. So KD the Kai coming out of the pit, maybe taking on that little bit more fuel that meant that he came out behind Louis, and I'm sure Louis will be very happy with that move there.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting move now. So Dark Lord definitely gaining a bit of time under pit stops and just getting past Kai. But no, Kai's going to try head down the inside into the next chicane. Looks like Dark Lord has to take a bit of evasive action and go off the track. But I wonder if that's going to be a penalty now for Dark Lord, as the track limits are very punishing in terms of heading off the track. But sometimes in GC7, if it feels like you were maybe pushed off by another driver, it sometimes lets you off. So it looks like Dark Lord is going to keep that position by taking two off the track. As we see now, Swizzy in second position, as Midnight will be definitely coming to the pit lane. In fact, I think Midnight's nearly on zero. Maybe we'll have to see when it comes in. Yes, he's going to be on zero. as he comes in for this pit stop now. So that means Swizzy will inherit the lead coming around the Parabolica now, with Dark Lord second and Kai in third. Interesting stuff. Kirk staying out as of right now, so is going to be splitting Kai and Sophia in P5. But we'll be coming to pit soon.
Yeah, Midnight either, perfectly planned, or he knew it all along that he was going to stretch that fuel tank to as much as it could handle, and he did that by coming into the field with 0%. So yeah, I mean, he definitely knows how long that McLaren can last on a full fuel tank, and I'm sure he'll be fueling up to 100% again, so he can go that a little bit longer into the race, as Kirk also comes in with 0% fuel. So drivers, perfectly planning out their pit stop and their strategies. As we see Katie the Kai getting on the back of Darklord, and Darklord looks a little bit kind of wiggly coming out of that first chicane. We've seen it before, and we've known from personal experiences, if you put the accelerator down just that a little bit too much coming out of the chicane there, it does unsettle the car just that a little bit.
We see Kai side by side in chicane now. Will Darklord not have to go off the track this time? It looks like he doesn't, but it does mean that Kai can't really get a move, and it looks like Kai will just have to stay in P3 for now. But it does look like the Corvette does have the pace over the M6 right there, so it's just a matter of time of whether Kai is going to get past. And it looks like but actually Kai is going to go off into the gravel there, taking a trip onto the gravel, and that is unfortunately going to drop him a bit back through Dark Road, so we'll have to regain that time, maybe just in the turbulent air of the BMW. But yeah, it looks like everyone's back to their positions, except Midnight has of course dropped behind Coach and Sophia, and was ahead of them before the pit stop, so that's interesting. But Coach has definitely lost a bit of time to Sophia as well, as they head now into Scary. Midnight is looking very close to Coach. Maybe a move going to be launched on the AMG driver soon.
Yeah, good spot there. Midnight getting on the back of Coach, and obviously freshly fueled and picking up a new set of softs. Midnight, the pace of that McLaren will be super fast at the moment, as opposed to the Coach who pitted a few laps ago. So yeah, Midnight potentially, with that fresh set of tyres, might get a move down into turn 1, as we see them going. Might give him a little bit of a bump draft to start off with. Getting in that slipstream of the Mercedes, potentially might bide his time and not go for a move into turn 1, and might leave it for a little bit later into the lap.
Yeah, Midnight just holding position for now in P5, and Sophia inherits that P3 after the pit stop, so up into the podium for her. One thing I'd just like to mention though is that it looks like Sophia and Sophie kind of distance grown between them. We saw them battling for the whole start of the race, and now unfortunately they're separated on track, so maybe some differing strategies going on there, but we'll have to see if there can be anything different towards the end of the race. We just look down the field now. Hartman in the Corvette in P8 right now. Koulias P9 in the B or Z. Yvonne P10, of course. Just driving around there on the medium tires right now. So a lot of drivers have switched onto the mediums after pit stops.
Coach
you see Sharon and Kirk. Oh, Coach is after losing the car there now. Off of the second Lesmo. So just heading onto the gravel, taking a trip onto the gravel, and just spinning the car straight round.
Yeah, unfortunately, he loses it as he comes out of there. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Mac. And Midnight, making some evasive action there to make sure that he didn't get caught up in that little bit of kind of a drift by Coach into the wall. As we see LB Lewis also getting past Coach here, and also spotted Sophie, managing to avoid Coach, who was in the middle of the track. So yeah, like I said earlier in the sprint race, you never want to crash when there's traffic on the track, because if they don't spot you, it's going to make your race and their race a little bit worse for wear. But Coach, he's not totally out of the fight, as it's brought him only down to P7 and fighting with LB Lewis. So I think he'll pit to repair that damage, and he'll look to fight again for another day.
Yeah, as we see Coach now heading into the pits, going to be repairing that damage. Very unfortunate. I mean, literally just made of his stop, and yeah, that's going to drop him down the order now. So that's one out of contention. But that does mean Midnight will inherit P4, so Midnight will be very happy with that one. Of course, just driving the 650S, you know, we didn't see that car come alive in the sprint race, but definitely over the feature race. We do know the 650S is a very good car for these longer length races, as it's quite good on fuel, quite good on tires. It's just a consistent car. But yeah, I mean, unfortunate for Coach. I mean, he was doing really well the whole race, having battles, and just one mistake like that around here can ruin your race.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you make, like you say, when you make that tiny mistake, it can have a huge effect on your race and your finishing position. But it's very easily done around here. If you catch that little bit too much curb and put that accelerator down just a little bit too much coming out of the corner, it does unsettle the car. So unfortunately, and it may have got a little bit of the gravel or the grass coming into that section, which definitely doesn't help when you're trying to get that traction down. So yeah, unfortunately, Coach, you know, a little bit probably disappointing for him, but we've still got over half of the race to go, so I'm sure he'll be back up and fighting for those positions shortly. We're just looking through the grid. We also have a battle in between Hartman and LB Lewis about to come to blows here, as we see Hartman on the back of LB Lewis, tucking into the back of that 650S into the slipstream. And I've got to say, you know, Hartman having a really good showing so far. Like you say, that Corvette looking strong around here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like now we've got Hartman and Lewis side by side now heading into turn 1. The McLaren versus the Corvette C7 side by side. Still no one able to inch anyone out, but it looks like Lewis is going to inherit that P6 and get past the Corvette driver of Hartman. But Hartman might have another chance to strike back, because he will be in the slipstream heading into turn 3 now. Of course, Curva Grande is turn 3, and it is a very grand corner, because it's a very nice prolonged right-hander, and side by side once again heading into the second chicane. But of course, that outside line is not optimal for Hartman, and he just has to back out.
Yeah, looks like that loses him quite a lot of time. He did brake quite late compared to LB Lewis, but obviously LB Lewis had the race in line, which meant that Hartman did have to kind of bide his time, and unfortunately couldn't make that move stick. But you know, I think he'll be lining up that move for another lap when he gets a little bit closer to LB Lewis again. Yeah, after that pit stop, it's brought Coach into P10 just behind Yvonne. So like I say, not too far away from the racing action, and I'm sure, you know, Coach will be happy about that. But yeah, I don't know if you agree, but all the drivers so far having a pretty good race, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Coach will probably want to get a move on and maybe overtake Ron soon, so we'll have to watch that space. But we see now Kirk just making his way around the track, heading down the straight, setting personal best in the BMW. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of settling down now. Of course, the pack is kind of spread out, so drivers will be managing fuel, managing tires, checking up on everything. As if I'm not wrong, where has Kai gone?
Oh yes, it looks like we've had a Katie the Kai potentially. You know, maybe a little bit of an accident or a fault there, meaning that Katie the Kai has dropped out of the race. We're down to 12 runners. So yeah, unfortunately. Oh, as we see Hartman picking up a lot of grass and gravel there, but does keep the car straight and tucks in just behind LB Lewis again. But yeah, unfortunately, Katie the Kai not finishing the race.
Yeah, so that means now Sophia in P3, so Dark Lord P2, and Swizzy P1. So not sure what really happened there. I'm sure we'll find out eventually, but right now, as I said, the pack is definitely spread out, and it's going to be interesting to see if people can catch up to each other, or if it's just going to be a case now for the next few laps that we are going to be managing tires, and we'll just see drivers making a round of the track. But right now, I'm not sure, is there any particular battles on the track that you're looking at, Sarah?
No, just scrolling through the field, and it looks like everyone's kind of... Oh, as I say that, we're just on board with Koulios. It does have a massive spin coming out of Ascari there. So unfortunately, picks up some rear damage as well. So yeah, unfortunately, Koulios having a little bit of a kind of a 360 720 spin there, and that does lose him quite a few time and position to Yvonne and coach.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I could see on that camera angle that it was kind of strange that he got rear end damage. He was trying to floor it to try to get the car to do a bit of a 360, but then that led to him hitting the wall. So unfortunate, just really hard to judge, especially when you have a spin like that, whether you should keep the power in to try and spin it back around, or if you just have to let it do its thing and recover it the hard way. But yeah, just looking through the field right now, of course, before you pointed out the spin, I mean, we've got Midnight there, P4, and we've got Sophie in P5. Maybe Sophie and Midnight might have a battle later on towards the race. I know Sophie just in Lesmo 2 and Midnight just coming out of Lesmo 2. Sophie in Lesmo 1 and Midnight coming out of Lesmo 2 just there. But yeah, Sophie with a 0.5-second penalty, that won't help her effort to catch up to Midnight. But yeah, I mean, it's always the stage of the race where we're looking for fights, we're looking for things to happen, looking for pit stops and all that. But of course, we did have a few battles, and then there, of course, was spin from coach, and we had Kai dropping out of the race. So some of those battles that we had, unfortunately, were prematurely ended because of other deciding factors.
Yeah, going back to KJ Kai, a big shame because obviously he was running kind of P2, P3 for the majority of the race. So unfortunate to see him have those difficulties as he was running quite high. But yeah, like you say, everyone's kind of at this point of the race, they're all kind of looking to the end, looking for their final pit stops and strategy. And I think, after the final pit stop, we may see drivers get that a little bit closer to each other. Yeah, but because of a few incidents here and there and a few kind of alternative strategies, it meant that most of the drivers are kind of, you know, in the, doing their race, just having quite a chilled couple of laps where they've got a little bit of breathing room between the driver in front and behind, which lets them have a little bit of chill time, a little bit of breathing, so that in that final few laps they can properly go for it and fight for their positions.
Yeah, I mean, we're just looking through the field right now, and it does look like, I want to mention that it might be because of Kai dropping out, but Kirk might have gotten up into P10 there just behind, but just making up his way up through the field slowly on the soft compound of tires. So be interesting to see if he can catch up to maybe Yvonne and Coach in P9 and P8. But yeah, I mean, what can I say? We're getting into the kind of mid stages of the races. Of course, we'd love to know what the drivers are thinking, what strategies they're thinking, but we can only go off of the data. So just kind of excited to see how long they're going to extend this, as coach with a 1-second penalty and will drop him back into the clutches of Yvonne. But yeah, just excited to see where the strategies will take the drivers, especially because many are on the mediums, a few on the softs, but mostly on the mediums. Be interested to see how long they can go, and whether, I mean, it probably will be fuel that causes people to pit. So just depends on how much time they're going to lose staying on the medium tires.
Yeah, 100%. I think the fuel is definitely going to go before the tyres will in this race here. But like you say, going back to some of the drivers picking that soft set of tyres, we saw the drivers that were on soft, especially Midnight, completing 14 laps on the soft. So, if you can do that again, it means that he only has to do a few laps on the medium, which obviously is the slightly slower tyre out of the two. So yeah, we could be on for some unique but fast strategies towards the end with not spending too much time on the medium set of tyres.
Definitely. And obviously Lewis, as you mentioned, coming into the pit lane there. So bit of an early stop. I do believe he oh yes, of course, because he pitted earlier because of the damage that he had sustained on the car. So maybe obviously taking pretty much full fuel, but would have pitted a lot earlier than some of the other runners. So yeah, I mean, it's a case of it's going to be the 2 stop. So we've had 1 stop already. But it might be close on fuel for some of the drivers. Like, I'm just looking through the field right now, and it would look like fuel might be the deciding factor between whether people might need to make another stop or can go to the end. It looks like a lot of drivers on about 25-30% fuel, Kirk even on 50%, but I do believe he pitted a bit later than some of the other runners. But I mean, 25% fuel would get you maybe about 3 laps, maybe 4 if you extend it very much. If you were short shifting and you have it in a different fuel mode. But I'd say maybe if they get to 4 laps, they'll have a 10-lap dash to the end on potentially a set of soft tires. So that's where I can see the strategy going for the medium runners. As for the soft runners, probably will do the same and bolt on a set of softs.
Yeah. Obviously, like you say, a last kind of minute dash to the end. Obviously, being on the faster tyre definitely helps kind of secure and cement their finishing positions. But obviously, for the drivers that have gone for those 2 set of softs in the first couple of stints, they are going to have to go on that medium, which potentially could slow them down just that little bit. But if they've got enough breathing room, they might be able to make that strategy work. But as we see a few drivers spending their half-second penalties coming out of that Ascari there. But yeah, just scrolling through, we don't have any battles at present. All the drivers seem to be kind of doing their own thing. Although we've seen, Swizzy again doing his own thing, having quite a big gap between himself and the Dark Lord because of that disconnect from Katie the Kite. As we see Swizzy coming into the pit, so like you say, an early pit stop, but 13 laps to the end, potentially could be bolting on a set of softs that might take him to the end.
Yeah, I mean, 13 laps, I'd be saying, yeah, you could probably get 13 laps, maybe 14 laps on a set of fuel. Now, that would be for other tracks. With Monza, I'm not so sure. He'll have to do a good bit of fuel saving to potentially get that fuel tank to the end. So we'll have to see what will happen. So Dark Lord is going to inherit the lead. So it would be clear air up in front of him. It was clear air already because there was quite a big gap between Swizzy and Dark Lord, but just going to be in P1, do some laps out there in first position, and we'll come into the pits at a later stage. We see Swizzy not taking a full tank of fuel. So maybe the fuel tank can get to the end. Maybe full fuel can get to the end of the race. We just have to find out. But that's interesting data for the other drivers, seeing Swizzy not take a full tank of fuel. They'll know that they can potentially get to the end on a tank.
Yeah, obviously that will be making the drivers feel that little bit more confident that they can potentially know it before they have to pit shortly. They can burn that little bit more fuel and kind of get a bit closer to the other drivers, knowing that they don't have to take on a full tank. They can take on kind of the required amount just to get them to the end. Although, some of drivers might opt for that little bit of a buffer zone where they put a little bit more fuel in to just make sure that they get to the end. But yeah, as we see Swizzy coming out in P4, not losing too much time to the drivers in front of him, who also will have to pit shortly. But yeah, I mean, I think Midnight, Midnight's had quite a lonely stint here. He's not had to fight for too much, and I'm sure he'll be very happy with that. Just having quite a chilled, quite kind of not having to do too much fighting or defending here. So yeah, a pretty good run from Midnight so far.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially with the 650S, I wouldn't say the 650S is the strongest car on this track. So definitely doing a good job given the circumstances. We see Sophia popping that sausage curb on the outside of Parabolica. So maybe just struggling with a bit of tire grip, just going a bit wider, really just pushing the limit. As yeah, I mentioned this earlier in the race, but the 650S has superior fuel and tires. Now I do know drivers have pitted at different points of the race, but you can just see Midnight with about 20% fuel, while others are struggling with about 9 or 10%. So you can see there's definitely a fuel disparity amongst the drivers, and it's definitely down to not only driving style but also the car manufacturer that they are driving for. So we'll just have to see. Maybe that will give him a few extra laps, few extra crucial laps that he can then use to his advantage to have newer tires towards the end of the race and catch some of these guys up in front.
Yeah, I definitely think that will be kind of running through Midnight's head at the moment, knowing that he's got that little bit more fuel compared to the other drivers, which means he doesn't have to spend quite as much time in the pits as what some of the other drivers are having to. So yeah, it could play into his favour there, as we see most of the other drivers coming into pit as well. Sophie picking up a full tank of fuel on the set of softs. So, like you say, different cars needing different kind of levels of fuel. Some may be able to get to the end with not needing a full tank and can kind of take 75%, but a few drivers going for that a full tank of fuel, maybe for confidence, just in case they have to do an extra lap, or in case they burn a little bit too much in the last stint. But yeah, like you say, Midnight still got that buffer zone, and I'm sure that will help in his pit stop, as we see Koulios getting on the back of Coach now. So after that spin, Koulios back in the fight into the top 10.
You see Dark Lord into the pit lane off of the medium tires, 1% fuel left, so cutting it close just like Midnight did on his stint. But to mention the full tank of fuel, some drivers will be short shifting, so it does short shifting does affect the percentage of fuel the game will tell you to get to the end of the race in the pit stop. So it could potentially be that if you take a bit of extra fuel and you decide not to short shift for certain laps, your fuel, the predicted fuel will go down. So if drivers are going to be pushing, which I'm sure some drivers will be pushing towards the end of this race, that extra fuel could be useful for those that might have been short shifting, and it may affect their fuel rating. You see Dark Lord out with 93% fuel, so definitely not taking a full tank. Same as Swizzy, of course. Taking a full tank, it will slow you down for an extra bit of fuel. The car will be a bit slower, as of course you're carrying all that extra weight. As you see now, Coach in P10 ahead of Koulios, but Koulios looks like he might be catching up.
Yeah, it definitely looks like Koulios is caught up after that little bit of a mishap that he had a few laps ago with that massive spin. But yeah, the BRZ doesn't look 100% comfortable around this track. Kind of like you say, like the McLaren, it's not one of its kind of strongest tracks. But I think given the fact that this track doesn't suit the BRZ, Koulios is doing a pretty good job. Seem to be on the back of a few drivers. Yeah, unfortunately, making a few mistakes here and there, but I'm sure next track, which is Dragon Trail, I'm sure he'll be back, fighting for slightly higher positions.
And Coach will be happy to hear that he has come out ahead of Yvonne, so that does mean that he gained a position there. And you see now it is Sophia leading the pack right now, as Midnight in P2 and Swizzy catching close behind.
Yeah, all the drivers quite close to each other after that final pit stop. And Midnight, who's just in front of Swizzy now, we'll see that the freshly pitted Swizzy, and he's got slightly fresher tyres and a bit more fuel than him, will be kind of hurtling his way down towards him and get on the back of that McLaren as quick as he can. But yeah, I think Midnight's got to be pretty pleased with himself here. He's only got 9 laps to go, and he's in P2. Obviously, he has to come in for a pit stop in the next couple of laps, but he's got that buffer zone to the drivers kind of P5 downwards. So Midnight on for a pretty good result here, and potentially, may get on the podium.
Yeah, as we see the fuel now running down in that McLaren, so he will have to pit this lap, and will come out behind Swizzy and probably behind Dark Lord, I'd assume. But we'll have to see if Sophia, of course, Sophia does have a lot less fuel, so maybe might be able to gain a bit of time to Sophia in the pit stop, which is probably the person he'll be fighting after these pit stops happen, as will be coming out ahead of him. But yeah, I mean, the two will be pitting this lap, so it'll be interesting to see. It'll probably be soft tires. We'll have to see how much fuel is needed for both.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see who can get out first. Will Sophia take on that little bit more fuel, or will Midnight take on a little bit more fuel, which could, see them lose quite some crucial seconds between the two, especially, if you want to get that P3 towards the end of the race, as we've only got kind of 8 laps to go. It's going to be tight between these two. But the Dark Lord also, coming through, looking to get back into his P2, which is pretty much held for the majority of the race. Again, quite a quiet race for Dark Lord, but sometimes those quiet races are what you need. Just a nice kind of chilled but good performance. As we see Sophia out of the pits first. So Sophia out of the pits, Midnight coming out of the pits on a set of mediums, so he's gone for the set of mediums for those last remaining 8 laps.
Yeah, I don't believe Midnight was on the mediums yet, so that might actually be his medium stint. I wouldn't be very surprised if he took softs for the last 9 laps. So that is going to put him on the back foot for catching Sophia, and he did take more fuel as well. So it may look like Midnight, unless like the softs won't be worn down by 9 laps. It's just simply there's not enough corners to wear down the tires. So honestly, in my opinion, unless Sophia makes a mistake or is just slower on raw pace, it looks like Midnight might not be able to catch Sophia for the podium.
Yeah, obviously we've still got 8 laps to go, so potentially, unless Sophia does make a mistake, like you say, or something, something big happens which changes the order, this could be, our finishing order. Although we have a bit of a battle between Coach and Koulios about to brew again. Also, just having a quick flick through the drivers, we've got the likes of Kirk as well, not too far behind Koulios and Coach, so potentially trying to get that a little bit closer into the closing stages of this race. Again, going back to a lot of the drivers, they've had quite a quiet kind of couple of stints. Obviously the first stint is always the most busiest for most of the drivers, but a track like Monza, as soon as you're going for those pit stops, it does kind of space the drivers out quite a bit. But sometimes races like that are needed where you're not necessarily on top of each other 24/7, or like for 36 laps in this case. But yeah, it looks like we're in for a good last couple of laps. Swizzy picking up a second penalty there, so potentially making a few track limit mistakes there.
Yeah, this is one of those tracks where unless you have like at least 5/10 raw pace, it's very hard to catch or gain time, gain more time, because it's a case of that as you see Sophia running into the gravel there. It's a case of there's not enough course. Koulios to spun round in P9. It's going to let Kirk and potentially a Vaughn pass now. There's chaos. It seems nobody wants to let me talk right now, but yeah, it's a case of unless you have 5/10 in hand of raw pace against another driver, it's very hard to find more time than that, because the fact there's so little corners, and it's a case of if you try to push more, there's very deadly gravel and sausage curbs that will lose you even more time than you're trying to gain. So it's a case of it's very hard to catch drivers, and that's why we see some of these gaps sometimes after the pit stops, that the gaps just can't be closed unless you have slipstream, because unless you have just the raw better pace, it's quite hard to gain more time, as there's not enough corners to do it.
No, 100% agree there. Some of the tracks, obviously, like kind of the Red Bull Ring, Barcelona that we've had previously, you can catch I can say you can catch easily. You can't always, but when you're on the back of someone, you can really kind of stay with them for the majority of the race. A track like Monza, once you've lost that slipstream and you've come in for your pit stops, so you're not kind of near anyone. Like you say, it's extremely hard to get onto the back of a driver and catch up. But it's not impossible, but it's just very hard to do around Monza. But I think all in all, the drivers probably appreciating having a little bit of a quieter race, as opposed to some of the tracks that we've been to. It's always kind of on-track action for the majority of the race. But I'm pretty happy with how the drivers are done. I'm sure the drivers themselves will probably be very critical of some of their mistakes. But I don't think I think all the drivers should be pretty proud of themselves. 36 laps around Monza isn't the easiest to do.
And we see Koulios coming into the pits now. Not sure if he had damage. it would look like he did not. It's just simply a normal green flag pit stop for some extra fuel. In fact, not going to change off the softs as well. He's not going to go for new tires. This is an interesting call because you wouldn't lose that much time from changing onto newer tires, but it does look like he just simply doesn't want to. He just wants to stay on them softs. Especially, I mean, maybe it's a case of that he feels just fine on the tires, that the car balance is fine, because you've got an understeery car and you want an oversteery car. You want a pair of a bit worn soft, so maybe that's what he's going for. But yeah, I mean, the race is settling down now. We've got about 7 laps to go, and yeah, I mean, throughout the field, it's been some pretty good performances, and there's been a few mistakes from drivers. I do just want to point out a driver that I've been watching and I think has done pretty well is Lewis. Of course, he had an issue earlier on in the race where he got damaged, I believe, if I remember correctly, an incident with Yvonne, I think. But yeah, I mean, just got put down pretty far down the grid after that incident, but has just been keeping it consistent in the race, and yeah, is just in P7 right now, and might potentially be able to catch Hartman up ahead for P6. So I think definitely a good performance from them, able to regain the positions they lost at the start. And you see, yeah, there's about maybe a half a corner separating the two as they headed into the Parabolica there. Obviously, Coach is catching potentially from behind, but we have 6 laps to go as they cross the line here now. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. That we've had another spin from Koulios coming out of the Ascari, so maybe potentially not picking up another set of softs or another set of tyres has put Koulios on the back foot there. Potentially not getting the traction that he wanted, or not having the rubber, enough to carry that amount of speed through that section there. So unfortunately, yeah, spinning again, coming out of that section and getting some front end and some suspension damage. I didn't know that was that hard to say on the closing stage of the race. So unfortunately, he will have to come into the pits again to repair that damage, which will put him probably on the back foot here.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. Maybe the sticking on them soft tires wasn't the best call. But yeah, I mean, he's just been struggling the whole race with that BRZ. I mean, it's a tricky car, but yeah, the curbs are definitely unforgiving here, and maybe just hitting the curb and going onto the Astro. It does look like he might have hit a curb earlier in the corner, because to end up backwards in that section of the track that he was in that gravel trap on the right hand side that you'll see Lewis pass in a second. Yeah, just on the right hand side there, to end up backwards in that is very difficult, unless you had a big enough hit into the wall that it reversed your car. But I think maybe hitting the curb on the left hand side just spun the car around, sent him into the gravel trap like that. But yeah, that doesn't really change the order, except I think that Sharon got past Koulios for P11, so Sharon gaining a position because of that. But wow, Swizzy's got a 1.5-second penalty. I mean, it would be a bit worrying if he didn't have such a monumental gap between himself and Dark Lord. But yeah, just maybe pushing the limits right now. I mean, at least he does have the comfort of being able to do that with such a gap. Maybe just getting used to the car. Of course, it is a new car for him this season, so maybe just using this gap, using the advantage to his benefit, and just maybe getting a bit used to the car.
Yeah, we've heard from Swizzy in the past that he's had to adapt. The past few seasons, he's had to adapt to 3 different cars. He likes to challenge himself that a little bit. Not get too complacent with one car. He likes to challenge and get to know a few cars. But what he seems to always struggle with is kind of the tyre wear of the cars that he chooses. But I think the more races he does, the more he gets used to it, and it definitely doesn't slow him down, to say the least. Although he says he struggles with the tyre wear, he seems to be doing a pretty good job of it today. Unfortunately, obviously picking up those penalties, which unfortunately is quite easy to do when you go outside of those white lines. But like you say, I think he'd be worried if he wasn't so out far and quite a big gap between himself and Dark Lord. But I think potentially that might be why he creates that little bit of a gap. He knows if he makes a few mistakes here and there, it's not going to lose him too much time, and it's not going to cost him the win. Right, so Sophia coming out of that second chicane there. Got 3 laps to go, so nearly at the end, and a few drivers, getting ready to hopefully get a little bit closer to the driver in front, as we see Coach on the back of LB Lewis there, looking like he's going to catch him shortly. But just behind we have Kirk, who looks like he's setting some personal bests at the moment. So could he be in contention to get the 2 in front of him? We shall see. Like I say, we're on the closing stages of the race. But anyone caught your eye, Mac? Who are you looking at the moment?
I think Sophie, definitely. Sophie is catching up to Midnight in P4, so it might not be all smooth sailing yet for him. So we'll have to see what happens. But you see there, Midnight setting 149s and Sophie setting 148. So the pace difference is about a second a lap. So will Sophie be able to catch Midnight within these 4 laps? We'll have to see.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting few laps to the end here, as it seems that all the drivers' last pit stop has brought them a little bit close to each other, but not as close as we thought it would. Who it has benefited at the moment is, like you say, is Sophie and Coach at the moment coming up. But it's funny enough to the 2 McLarens, so it just seems like the 2 McLarens obviously on the back foot here. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty good race so far, and I'm excited for these final few laps, and I'm sure the drivers will be as well. Like I say, 36 laps around Monza. It's quite a long race, and obviously you've got to be on the concentration levels the whole race, so I'm sure the drivers will be looking forward to getting across that finish line. But yeah, it looks like Midnight, going on to the mediums this late into the race, it may have put him on the back foot, as he looks like he's losing quite a bit of time to Sophie behind him. So like you said, Mac, it could be a potential, Sophie might get on the back of Midnight in the last lap or so.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. It'll be a tough one. Sophie's going to have to keep her pace up and catch Midnight, as we see Lewis defending from Coach here now. Of course, Lewis, I will mention, Lewis is running a bit low on fuel. He's got a bit less than Coach does. It'd be interesting to see if he can actually make that last for 3 laps. Of course, as we've seen with Midnight earlier, the 650S is quite good on fuel, so that may be just a false alarm. But we'll have to see. It could be crucial coming towards the end of the race, and if Lewis ends up running out of fuel, or if he's enough to defend from Coach. But Coach is catching, and we see Kirk just looming in the background there, making his way through the corners and following these guys just from a distance.
Yeah, Kirk having front row seats to this battle at the moment, and I'm sure he'll be trying to wish that those 2 are fighting a little bit so he can catch up a little bit here. But as we see LB Lewis and Coach going side by side through Ascari here, so he'll come to a little bit of a collision between the 2. So obviously quite matched on speed. They've a little bit of a collision, and it's meant that Coach is now on and in front of LB Lewis. So Coach getting a good run through that section there. But again, Kirk not too far behind. We'll see that these 2 in front of him are battling it out. So like I say, hopefully he's wishing that the battle might slow them down a little bit, which could bring him into the fight.
Yeah, I mean, Lewis is going to have slipstream here on the straight, so might be able to catch Coach, but it's just a case of, you can see there now the fuel warning light coming on Lewis's car, so who knows, maybe he might not have enough fuel. We'll have to find out now in these next few laps. Lewis too far back to make a move, tires just maybe giving up on him, and he might be saving a bit of fuel as well, as we see Yvonne behind this pack with a penalty. But yeah, Kirk is just catching ever so much up to these 2. He might be able to get Lewis, but will he be able to catch Coach by the end of the race?
Right, will Kirk be able to catch LB Lewis and Coach that are just in front of him now? But on a quick side note, Koulios picking up some quite severe damage and picking himself up a 6-second penalty. So I think that will be Koulios' race done and dusted. Unfortunate picking up that damage on the penultimate lap. Oh, and we've seen Kirk losing it on the curb there, which again gives him kind of race ending damage, big engine damage, front end damage and suspension damage. So I'm very unfortunate for Kirk. He looked like he was on a good result there and a good battle.
Yeah, similar circumstances to the incident we believe happened earlier with Coach when Coach got the pretty bad damage, except in a bit of an earlier part of Lesmo 2 and Lesmo 1. So yeah, unfortunate there for Kirk. He was catching up to Lewis and Coach and just unfortunately dropping it on the curb, leading him to spin round. Um, as for the rest of the drivers, it looks like Swizzy is on his final lap and is just heading out of Ascari now, heading down this straight. Got a bit of slipstream from Avon, that won't matter because it is the final lap, unless he is setting a lap time with some very worn out softs, which I doubt is happening. But a flawless race today here from Swizzy as we round the Parabolica. He takes the final corner on the final lap to come home and win the race here at Monza in round 3. A brilliant performance from Swizzy, and a bit further behind is Dark Lord, who just couldn't catch up to Swizzy today, unfortunately. Quite a big gap between himself and Swizzy, but still a great performance to get himself P2 on the podium. A good haul of points here today for Dark Lord, of course, and he's going to be rounding this final corner now, as Swizzy just did moments ago, to take home P2 as he crosses the line and takes the checkered flag. Sophia comes home in P3 in the Corvette, not far behind Dark Lord, as Midnight as well in P4 heads down the final straight.
Yeah, it looks like Dark Lord nearly celebrated a bit too early there. Just manages to cross the finish line before Sophia. But quite a race for Dark Lord, but a pretty good result nevertheless, as we see Midnight coming around the final corner looking to secure P4. Again, a really good race from Midnight today. He's a bit of a quiet race for him, but he's had battles at time and a unique strategy call. But just behind we have Sophie in that 458 finishing in P5. And just behind them, again coming through that final corner, is Hartman in the Corvette. Again, a mega result for Hartman in that Corvette today. A bit of a quiet race, but like Max said before the race, the Corvette's been strong around here, so I'm sure Hartman will be very happy about that. In P7, we then have Coach in that very distinctive snake livery, securing P7. And in P8, just behind, we have LB Racing in that 650S. Again, a very good race, and I'm sure he'll be very happy. In P9, we have Yvonne with that lovely screen to speed livery, securing herself a P9 finish. I'm sure she'll be very happy about that. P10 and already finished, we have Sharon, and then P11 with some big damage. We then have Koulios. Kirk may have dropped out on that final lap, so he must have just crossed the finish line and then dropped out with obviously that kind of race-ending damage. Okay, so that's the feature race done and dusted, and what a feature race that was. Mac, who is your driver of the day? Who impressed you the most?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think there were quite a lot of good racers and good races today, but I do think there is one specific one that stands out to me, specifically Midnight in the feature race. I think he started P6 after qualifying, and I think he did very well to get himself up into P4 and keep that position solid. We didn't see one of his banana strategies today, but I do think that it was a very good effort and definitely all fell into place today. And especially in the 650S, in one of the less dominant cars around Monza, is a very good effort from him. In terms of the sprint, I don't know. I think Midnight didn't have as good of a race in the sprint, so in my opinion, I think it has to go to I think Swizzy, I'd say. I mean, Swizzy came from, I think, P13 to P2. So I have to say that's a pretty good effort. Of course, there are many other drivers that went up positions, like Kai went from P10 to P1. But I do think Swizzy managing to take advantage of some of the stuff that was going on, getting himself from P13 to P2, I think that's about 11 position gain. That's a really good performance from him.
Yeah, and definitely driver of the day worthy. We all know how strong Susie is. I think Midnight again as well. the feature race is definitely a driver of the day. But obviously some honourable mentions. Obviously, I think Sophie did really well as Hartman. P5 and 6. Obviously, we know that Hartman likes improve week on week, and I think with that Corvette he's really showing his pace now. So yeah, I think those two did remarkably well as well. But I think all of the drivers, they've had their ups and downs, some of them more downs than up, but quite a few drivers there could be in contention for driver of the day. But all in all, what did you think of the race?
Oh, it was a good race. I mean, I think it was a bit of a slow burner in the feature race because there was obviously, as we mentioned, quite hard to keep like within a second or two of another driver. So the pack was quite spread out. But the sprint race was quite good. There was a lot of action in the sprint, but I do have to say, maybe not my favorite feature race of the season, but I do have to say it was good action, and I think all the drivers did exceptionally well.
Yeah, could not agree more. But next up, obviously, we've got a slight interruption because of the football. But next up, we will have round 4, which I'm sure the drivers will be starting to prepare now. And like I say, info will be announced as to we'll slightly delay or we'll reschedule the next round because of the football. But yeah, looking forward to the next round already. It's been a pleasure to have McManley in the commentary box with me tonight. And thank you for providing your insight into the race as well. We know that you're a fellow kind of racer in the red lobby, so you know these drivers quite well. So thank you for joining and thank you for providing some really good insights.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Of course, I'm here to replace Deadline for this race as he's having a few technical problems. But yeah, it was very good. Of course, I'm not racing in the red lobby anymore, so it's kind of sad to not be racing alongside all the amazing racers. Of course, the familiar faces I recognize from the last 3 seasons. But I will break the fourth or fifth or sixth wall or whatever, and say that the England game was just one, like, literally moments before we were recorded this. So so that was a bit of a last minute change. So we're still figuring out what's going to happen with the next round. But yeah, I think thank you for having me, and it's been great. And I hopefully I'll be here for some of the next rounds.
Yeah, he'll be back, whether in or out of the car, we'll find out. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to have McManley tonight. But that rounds off round number 3 at Monza, and a pretty good round we had. A few difficult drives for a few drivers, but like I say, I'm sure they'll be preparing for round 4. But just ending off, we'll see you for round 4, and we will announce the new date soon.
Next race, Daytona Road Course.